Has anyone ever honored one of those if we're still single at 40 let's get married commitments? How did it go? Weird couple my wife knew had such a pact and followed through. Girl was a really introverted, quiet, homely type. Sweetest girl. But she never had a boyfriend as far as I knew. And we saw her off and on for 6 or 7 years. Then suddenly out of nowhere she invited us to her wedding. Anyways, it was to a guy we had met a couple of times who was one of her friends who seemed very much like her. My wife teased her that more must have been going on all that time. But she was straight up about it. And said no. They just decided it was time. Conversation was something like, yeah, you know how people have pacts to get married if neither of them are till they hit. Well, we just decided it really wasn't going to happen for either of us. And to cut that short, basically we were just like, cool, and then left it at that. Anyways, she married him. They looked happy. The speeches were a bit odd. They didn't really talk about love but a lot about how they were marrying their best friend. They are still together. It's gotta be at least 5 years. And they have a little kid. Last we saw them they looked happy and that's all that matters really. We ended up getting married at 30 instead. As it turns out we loved each other and made every excuse to ignore it. Had one to get married at 30. I got married before that and I don't think my friend took it well. We had sort of a strained relationship after and now we don't really talk much. Used to be best friends. Had one for 30 and moving in together. She was 7 years my senior and around that time we were both in a transient part of our lives. So I asked. She said no and moved across the country. I think, if memory serves, my wife and I had one of those, but we ended up together and married in our early 20s. I did. I dated my first girlfriend when we were about 17-19. Then she broke up with me but we had said such a thing before while we were still dating. We both had a few boy girlfriends over the years. But about 15 years later we met again and essentially said I really didn't find anyone with whom I felt like I did with you. But it wasn't with resignation. More of an epiphany. So we started dating again. And married soon after. And couldn't be happier. I had this one friend I would hook up with on and off for years and we had this pact if she hit 30 we would marry. I would be 35. I always avoided actually dating her because she cheated on every boyfriend she was ever with and was a bit of a nomad. I told her I didn't want to ruin the friendship. When I got engaged to my wife my FWB was livid. She figured she can have all the fun and we'd get married at some point. I never spoke to her again after my engagement. She got married last year. I congratulated her but got no response. I did that. I met her in high school. We grew apart over the years. We reconnected and said let's get married if we're both single when we're 40 then we said duck it. Let's go to Vegas and get married by Elvis. Our first kiss was Thanksgiving Day and we were married on the 17th of December. We're still going strong after 7 years. Longest relationship I've been in. Best decision of my life. I had several pacts like this over the years. Within a year, they were all in serious relationships. I was like the wedding bargain matchmaker. All good though. Been with a great woman for almost 4 years now. And we were good friends for 7 years before that. We didn't do this exactly. But when we were 19 we joked that we should get married if we're both 35 and single. 2 years later, I came home for a week from college. We hung out in our normal friend group. And she and I hooked up for the first time. We ended up starting a relationship. Got married when we were 27. And are still together at 30. Not a result of the pact obviously. But funny that we ended up married anyways. I told my boyfriend that I will marry him when I retire. Now I have to work for the rest of my life. I didn't know this was actually a thing for other people. I had one of these though. Here's my story. My family has a summer place on a lake in another state where I have gone every summer since I was a baby. Other families did the same so I grew up with these other families' kids. There was like 10 kids in our group and we spent almost every waking hour hanging out together. One of the girls in the group was about a year older and kinda shy and chubby. Not that it mattered though we were just really good friends. Fast forward to our early 30s years. She had moved away from her small town much to the amazement of her family. It was the kind of small town that you were born in and would probably die in. Nobody ever left, but she did. She had a great job where she was able to make and save a ton of money. She had also lost weight and had become crazy beautiful. At the same time, most of our group of friends were getting married and working on having families. As a joke, one of our friends said, hey, if you two are still single when you hit 40, you have to marry each other. We had been drinking, so it was easy to get us to agree. Fast forward again. Before I hit 40, I met the love of my life and have two badass little ones. The girl from the lake had moved back to her little town and fell into the trap. She met a dude at a bar one night who got her pregnant and was never to be seen again. She was alone with her little one, and to be close to her family, she remained in the little town and had abandoned the path of a successful life that she had been on before. We still see each other every summer, and my wife hates it. She says it's so obvious that she still has a crush on you. It's weird how when you look back you can see those decisions that seem small at the time but have a huge effect on life. I could have married her and she would have been in a better place now. But I would not be where I am now if I went down that road. Life is weird, man. Full stop. Oh god, no. Mine was with my best friend's mother. She actually made a point of reminding me a few years ago. My BFF guy friend got married at 28. She is lovely and they are so happy. I'm actually wearing the Wonder Woman shirt they gave me for the wedding photos right now. I was a groomswoman. Through our 20s we kept putting the date later. 30, then 35, then 40 etc. I tell ya though, if she passes away in some freak accident and he decided to revert to the plan, you bet I'd be all in. I don't have romantic feelings for him, but I know he is a kinky guy, so I could figure myself out for that lol. I had one with a friend a while back, but at age 27. She was murdered 2 years ago. I turned 27 in January. Still hurts me heart. But I have an incredible woman now, but my memory of her is so great. My friend and I had something like that in high school. But it was 30 and we ended up dating until we turned 30 and got married. Not me, and doesn't really answer the question, but my current GF had one of these pacts with a guy she knew. It was a joke in their friend group course till me. Neither had dated. I don't think either took it seriously. I will answer after 10 years if I get someone to have such pact. My neighbor and I made this pact walking home from the bus stop in 3rd or 4th grade. If we were still unmarried by 30, we'd get married to each other. I emphasize unmarried because we have both been in serious relationships for 4+ years in our late 20s, but I wasn't giving him any other loopholes. He turned 29 in December 2018 and I turned 29k in January 2019. I dumped my long-term loser boyfriend. He proposed to his amazing and beautiful long-term girlfriend. Should not have put all my eggs in that basket. JK, there was only like 0.5% of me that thought it would really happen between my neighbor and me. It was just time to move on from my ex and definitely time for my neighbor friend to put a ring on his GF's finger. My friend Danny and I made this pact when we were like 12. We went to camp together for a few summers. Then his mom died and they didn't come back after that. But we were pen pals for years. Real old fashioned letters in the mail. And eventually email. Until one day, I'd say we were in our 20s. And he said I met someone. And his name is Scott. And now I'm married to Lady, so maybe that's why we got along so well as kids. I just watched the Friends episode today where Chandler says this to Monica. Weird. I'm marrying my best friend this weekend actually. I have to say, being nearly 42 myself, these pacts make no sense to me. In this day and age, 40 feels really early to be throwing in the towel. I feel like my life just gets better as I get older. I'm smarter, have some life experience, and I'm more financially secure. For me, now is the perfect time to properly start thinking about a long-term partner. I made an agreement like this. We live in different states. And I moved cities since we knew each other during my college days. He found my mom's number. And she passed his message on to me. I knew that's why he was calling. I was married and pregnant when I got the message and never called back. But I think of him all the time. I'm getting close to 40 and have come to terms with being single to my last breath. Not for a lack of trying, but the last one took a lot out of me, and the idea of starting over with someone new is just terrifying. I'll date but ultimately end up just adopting a bunch of dogs and living out my days with the undying love of those doggers. I know a couple at my church who were friends first. Like best friends, and when they got in their 30s they still weren't engaged or married to anyone, so they decided to get married. They're still together and very much in love. I've got a roller coaster of a story. So when I was a kid we got a new neighbor. He was great. Had a cute dog. Seemed to have his life together. But was chronically single despite his best efforts. Few months later we hear he got married. Much to everyone's surprise, because he clearly hadn't been seeing anyone prior. Turns out he had made a pact to marry his best female friend when they both turned 30. If they weren't in a relationship. And they followed through. She was the world's sweetest person. And really pretty to boot, frankly. Everyone was surprised that either of them felt this was necessary to begin with. She'd moved across the country to be with him. So she didn't have any family nearby, and that's probably partly how we all became so close. Anyhow, they were actually crazy happy together. Got another dog. etc. The only thing that seemed off was that despite several years of him and her talking about desperately wanting kids, she was pretty well always interacting with me. They were still childless, which everyone assumed was owing to a medical issue. Then we learned that, while an absolutely fantastic and loving husband when sober, he made for a mean drunk. This culminated in her snapping and pulling a knife on him. And leaving. They were separated for a few years, during which time neither wanted to explore divorce other relationships. Because they still loved each other. And her leaving was definitely the boot he needed to get his rear in gear. He spent those years with Alanon. Became incredibly involved in his church and community. And spent a lot of effort winning her back, convincing her he'd changed. They're now together and seemingly happy as ever. We only know all of this because he was super open about his problems with his community, doing some advocacy stuff. He had one brief fall off the wagon, but checked into rehab ? Or something like it, almost immediately, and has since been doing well. They've both decided not to have kids, because they're not sure he could handle the stress and the temptation to start drinking again. They've recently moved to an acreage in a very remote area, so we don't hear from them as often. But last I heard they were doing really well. Edit, AA not Alanon, till there is a difference. Edit. Holy cow, my first gold. Thank you. Whoever you are.